Hello, you're watching UATV English. We are broadcasting from the heart of Europe. Ukraine is on air. My name is Henry Keane. Hello. My name is Henry Keane. Hello, and welcome to the Munich Security Conference, NATO exercises, and possible war between Russia and Europe, where we'll discuss today. Volodymyr Zelensky and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz signed an agreement on security cooperation and long-term support. The bilateral document is valid for 10 years. It clearly sets out the specific security obligations that Germany will provide to Ukraine. In particular, the agreement spells out the priority areas of bilateral cooperation: military, political, financial, and humanitarian.
In this agreement with Germany, annual financial support for our defense, and for this year it is determined more than 7 billion defense support. These are clear contracts, clear delivery. The agreement contains absolutely rational clauses regarding the responsibility of Russia and all Russian war crimes committed against Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. Every war crime of the occupier must be punished, and it is quite fair. The agreement also fundamentally defines position regarding sanctions against Russia. Russian assets that are frozen in various jurisdictions. Every such asset of the terrorist state must be confiscated and directed to protect against Russian aggression.
Also, Ukraine and France signed a bilateral agreement on cooperation in the field of security. Also for 10 years, it will remain in effect until Ukraine joins NATO. The treaty will help the country strengthen the protection of its territorial integrity, French leader Emmanuel Macron emphasized during a joint press conference with Volodymyr Zelensky. He also said that France will allocate an additional €3 billion to support Ukraine and will supply it with military equipment as well as help with military training. This theme and some others we will discuss with Mark Voyger, Director of Global Management Program at the American University Kyiv and former Special Advisor in Russian Affairs to the Commanding General of U.S. Army Europe, General Ben Hodges. Hello and welcome, Mr. Hello.
Good afternoon, Henry. Thank you for inviting me. Always a pleasure joining your program.
Great. Thank you so very much. So my first question is, in your opinion, these agreements with France and Germany, are just a formality? Or maybe they will really change something in the geopolitics of Europe. Or after all, Ukrainians already have a negative experience of the Budapest Memorandum and do not really trust to new treaties. So what are these?
Well, I wouldn't call them a formality at all. It's actually becoming a trend. It's a long process, but it's becoming a positive trend whereby several major European powers already, beginning with the UK and now, of course, France and Germany, as you mentioned earlier, have signed such agreements. And from what I have seen, they're far more specific in critical areas related to Ukraine's security, also Russia's responsibility, punishing Russia, of course, and as you mentioned, the assets and a lot of important issues. This level of specificity is higher. Obviously, the context is entirely different. The global context, we back in '94, in the 90s, when the memorandum was signed, obviously the overall mood globally and especially of the West was that we're going to reap this and benefit from this peace dividend. Reap the benefits of the post-Cold War world. So, Russia is unlikely to attack. Obviously, that was an illusion, a dangerous delusion even. But nonetheless, what we're seeing today is that more and more European countries are joining this club of guarantors of Ukraine. So I think it's a very positive process, of course. A lot of work has to be done. And of course, no single agreement can supplement a full NATO membership, which I hope Ukraine will achieve in the foreseeable future. It'll be ideal if some sort of an invitation or an open door decision would be taken during the Washington summit, but that remains to be seen. But still, those agreements are far from a formal affair. I think they're quite legally binding. And they have specific, they will have specific repercussions for Russia, first and foremost.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong, Godspeed with these agreements, which only took 2 years for the world to understand what's actually going on in Ukraine. So that was my question was based on. But these two agreements were signed before the Munich Security Conference, an important event in the world security system. and architecture. I mean, so in your opinion, MSC is about security, or is it about the conference again?
No, MSC is about security being discussed at the highest level by current and former officials, as you know, high-level ministers, presidents, diplomats, really the political, military, and academic elite of the Euro-Atlantic community. Obviously, and Ukraine was represented at the highest level. So it's a very serious event. From what I know, unfortunately, there's been, the atmosphere after the conference conclusion has, been characterized as a bit gloomy. Obviously, the specter of war in Europe, the constant threat of future war between Russia and NATO is hanging really as a Damocles sword upon the heads of many Western leaders. Therefore, there were important discussions. That's where everybody really gets together and discusses what's important, in a very candid format. But this is it has a certain public value. Unfortunately, we also saw that President Putin has continued with his favorite kind of style of poking the West. Effectively executing or carrying out outrageous acts or statements exactly during this conference. As you know, in 2007, he, in plain view of everyone, in a very straight, kind of straightforward way, without parsing his words, threatened Georgia and Ukraine, threatened NATO that if NATO accepts those two countries, Russia would attack, which eventually happened. It happened so that Navalny was killed, assassinated exactly during this conference. So I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's Putin, trying to thumb his nose again at the West. But still, that shows us that even he and his regime consider Munich to be an event of the highest caliber. So it's worth making such outrageous statements there from his point of view.
Well, I don't think the world really should expect from the dictator anything else as a dictatorial behavior. I mean,
absolutely.
So when it is strange to hear that presidents of the mighty countries are a bit gloomy about Putin, well, I think we finally need to get together to find unity and deal with the problem. So let's talk about the front line, the actual what is going on the Ukrainian front line. So Ukrainian armed forces regrouped near Avdiivka. In fact, Russia seized the city, or rather what's left of it. So what does it mean for both sides, do you think? How critical it is for both sides? And why did Russians want it actually to capture this city, after all, so much?
Well, there are multiple levels of analysis, multiple angles from which we can look at it and assess what has just transpired in Avdiivka. Obviously, after many months of heroic resistance, the Ukrainian forces had to withdraw. Your command, your new commander-in-chief has made this decision. I think it's the right decision, given the massive forces that Russia had amassed, had accumulated in that particular area of the front. For them, of course, the effect is to a great extent psychological. We all know that elections are coming. Presidential elections, of course. They won't be fair, they won't be open, but nonetheless, Putin wants to show to his people, to Ukraine, to the world, that his army, his armed forces are still able to show something for the hundreds of thousands, I think over already 400,000 killed in action, wounded, incapacitated. So they have something to show for these enormous levels of casualties. And so the psychological effect is clearly there. they will be the Russian propaganda will be spinning it big time. I have no doubt about it. They already are. In practical terms, of course, Avdiivka was considered more important in terms of its geographical location, as far as I understand, than Bakhmut. It's just the Russians, I think, believe that they could expand from there into different areas. So it's more of a strategic juncture from what is known. But the Ukrainian forces have withdrawn to prepared positions where I should hope, or we should hope, that there will be a sufficient resistance, the resistance that would be able to block any further any Russian advances further into Ukraine. Of course, the Russian modus operandi has always been to push the borders as far as possible away from the currently occupied territories. This way, they can expand a bit further and then launch additional missile attacks against civilian areas in Ukraine. That's of course a negative development. Also, psychologically, for the West, we need to be very careful to try to counter as much as possible any defeatist attitudes by some who may say, "Well, look, the Ukrainians have withdrawn. Obviously, they've lost this battle. Why do we need to help them?" Obviously, this would be a very wrong thing to say. This is not the correct calculus, but still, I would expect. Again, the Russian agents of influence, or just people who are not convinced in Ukraine's victory, to actually start spreading such type of views to kind of divide and confuse the Western audiences and try to impact the Western politics. So psychologically, in purely in tactical terms, this withdrawal will have negative consequences. As I said, I hope they will be limited by Ukraine's military command and by also people really who understand what's at stake, and that the international aid for Ukraine must continue at all costs.
Well, in terms of that withdrawal, I believe that the commander-in-chief, Syrskyi, definitely calculated all the cons and pros of that before actually announcing that, and I believe they know what they're doing. So negative, yeah, people will be talking, and somebody would have to act. And this is obviously the commander-in-chief who has to just save lives of Ukrainians to keep this fighting against Russia's aggression. And that's the first and foremost thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, well, definitely the positive outcome is that the new commander-in-chief has been able to save the lives of course, many Ukrainian service members, which is number one priority. So from that point of view, of course, it is, as I said in the beginning, it's the right thing to do.
Mr. Voyger, thank you so very much for joining us today. I remind you that you were with UATV English. I hope you liked the experience.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you so very much. Hope to see you soon. To remind you, my dear audience, it was Mark Voyger, Director of Global Management Program at the American University Kyiv and former Special Advisor on Russian Affairs to the Commanding General of U.S. Army Europe, General Ben Hodges. That was UATV English from the heart of Europe. Thank you for your support. It really matters. See you very soon.